It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Welcome to Retire Repurposed. Well, on last week's episode, we challenged the conventional wisdom about wealth preservation in retirement and explored why so many retirees struggle to enjoy the wealth they've accumulated. Today, we're talking about that conversation a step further by examining the practical antidotes to what I call the money hoarding syndrome or money disorder. You know, since writing Repurposed, Ben Taatjes has witnessed countless clients grappling with this challenge, the tension between wanting to leave an inheritance and using their resources to make an impact today. But here's the thing. What if the greatest gift you could give your family isn't a large check after you're gone, but rather the example of living generously and purposefully right now? In this episode, we explore 3 powerful strategies to break free from unhealthy money mindsets and create lasting impact with your wealth while you're still here to witness it. Whether you're concerned about family dynamics, kingdom impact, or simply want to ensure your resources are used meaningfully, this conversation will challenge you to think differently about your wealth and its purpose in retirement. Enjoy this episode. All right, folks, welcome back to Retire Repurposed. Jared Sebesta here joining you on the show once again. So glad that you're joining us here. And if you are new to this podcast, new to this platform, you are certainly going to hear a little different idea when it comes to retirement. So many retirement podcasts out there are dealing with just the financials, how to build wealth, savings, the tactics of financial plans. And while that is certainly important, that's not what we cover on this show. This is really where life intersects with money. So again, if you're new to the show, we certainly welcome you. We have spent several shows now, 7 or 8 shows, talking about the changes or some of these ideas that were first introduced when Ben Taatjes wrote his first book, Repurpose: The Untold Story of Retirement in America, back in 2017. And we've taken deeper dives into some of these concepts that were first introduced when that book first came out. And not that those concepts are wrong, but as time goes on, we've done 200 of these shows, and as you talk about this and meet with more people and explore some of these ideas a little bit further, the depth of that message certainly gets deeper. We've covered a number of topics. I encourage you to go back on your favorite podcasting platform, find those shows, and listen to them because there's a lot of depth and richness there in those shows that you can really take into your retirement, whether you are retired, just retired, or maybe been retired upwards of 10 or 15 years plus. In last week's show, we titled it Die Rich or Live Well, Rethinking Wealth in Retirement. Ben Taatjes joins me on the show now. And Ben, we talked about a number of things, obviously, during that show, but really it came down to this idea of rethinking how we maybe define and live out retirement plans, you know, the kind of the financial side in people's minds, right?
Yeah, I think in the book, it kind of goes back to the chapter that I had about money doesn't buy happiness, but pensions do. And that chapter was one of my favorites. It still is, as I talk with people about the difference between wealth and income. And what's happened since the book, though, is this incredible, those interactions with people that have read the book, but also just talking with people about what that meant to them, and asking people to define wealth, define income, what's more important to you at this stage of life. And what ultimately usually comes from that is, well, I need income to survive. I need income to live. And that's the useful side of money. Yeah. And undoubtedly what always happens is, well, what if I run out? You know, what if I run out? And I said, well, when? When will you run out? I think that's important to look at. I mean, in an ideal world, if we're looking at money properly, it is a tool. As we talked about last week, is money's a tool, and it's a tool that's also most useful, right? That income is most useful at the right times of life and less useful at other times.
You know, I think that's a really interesting part to look at and an important concept because, you know, everybody thinks they're going to travel. Everybody thinks that they're going to have a certain lifestyle. And the truth is that when people retire, they're probably spending a little bit more right away, and then that tails off. And so to your point, if you're going to especially give away money, there are certain times, you said the utility of money changes, especially with time at certain ages. And I think that's a really important concept.
Yeah, the usefulness of that income it changes over time. Mm-hmm. And I talked about in the book, Repurpose, I said this shark fin mentality of looking at your wealth as it increases over time. And ideally, it should then kind of peak at a certain age and then start to go down the other side. That we talked about, but I didn't get as deep. And I think the depth of the discussions we're having with people now, it's just so valuable that I want to bring that front and center to people, because so many people struggle with this idea of, I need to continue to amass more.
Right.
And once they get to that point, they keep going higher.
Right.
And that the goalpost changes. We know that as success as a motivator is not a good true motivator, right?
Yeah.
It ends up feeling empty. When we look at wealth, when we look at money, any type of motivator like success and money it doesn't work.
No.
It must look like not the end, but the means. And I think that's the importance. When we look at the utility of money, that we do look at it like a tool. There's certain times in life where it is really important to have high income, and there's others that the income that you have is almost hard to spend. I'll have that with clients, Jared, where they'll say, I feel like I've got more income today than I did when I was working because of, planning and everything else. I'm like, well, we need to, fix your plan, number one. We need to get you in a place where you're, using the income, using what you've saved. You've heard some of the most wealthy people, Jared, talk about this. I've heard Warren Buffett, for one, talk about that money just doesn't. It's different, right? It doesn't. I mean, at his point, it really looks different,
sure,
right? Because he's one of the wealthiest individuals in the world. And what I've asked clients when looking at the utility of money and the age at which they want money. If Warren Buffett doesn't necessarily think he can spend everything he's got, right? He gives away a ton of it. But for you, would you trade places with him?
Right.
And I'll ask you, Jared, would you trade places today with Warren Buffett?
Today, where I am now?
Yeah. Would you really? Not you.
Okay.
I'm talking about not just take his wealth, but I'm taking, would you take him over you? His life, what he has over yours?
No, well, of course not.
Yeah, because the guy's in his 90s, right? And has a very short time window.
Yeah.
He can't do what you can do with what you have.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing, I don't know your personal net worth, but I'm guessing it's less than Warren Buffett.
Probably slightly, yes.
Yeah, slightly less. So I'll ask clients that. It's like, okay, would you trade? Okay, so then we know. We both agree that there is a utility to money,
sure,
right? And from there, you start to back into, okay, when do you want to spend your money? When is it more useful to you?
Yeah.
And then you start to get to this idea of, it's okay to maybe not die with zero, but the mentality that you don't have to continue to amass wealth forever and ever and ever, specifically if you're not liking the work that's creating the wealth.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of things there. By the way, I thought you were mentioning his income right now, where I am in my life right now, because to your point, the utility of money changes with age. And you said it last week too. You said sometimes you'll have a client and they will, there's an estate payout or something like that, and you're telling perhaps an elderly couple or an elderly woman that they're now going to get, a certain amount of wealth, and it doesn't even hit them at all, because it doesn't mean anything. It means different things to different people at different times in their life. And again, you and I are about the same age. I got 4 kids at home, so to be able to have that kind of income it could probably be nice now.
The income, but not the life.
No. That's what I thought you meant.
His life, right, and his age. Makes it. It doesn't really matter.
No.
If you ask him too, the same thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter at this point. So I think that's important that people start with that, and come to that realization. Whatever age you're at, is what is the utility of money? And I think that kind of segues to really what I want to talk about today, Jared, is what's the antidote? What's the mindset have to be for us to really get over this constant accumulation idea?
Yeah.
And I think it starts with realizing, first and foremost, money is a tool.
That's a great segue. Again, before we jump in, I do want to encourage people to go back and listen to last week's show, because we dive into this and we get more into Bill Perkins' book, Die with Zero. I may ask you about that, but he talks about this concept of deaccumulation. Bill Perkins believes in the very much so the shark fin mentality, which you build it and then you start to level off and spend it as you go throughout your year, throughout your life. You're missing a key ingredient. We mentioned this on last week's show too. There's one specific piece of information that we just don't know as human beings. We don't know how much time we have left on planet Earth, which makes this a delicate balance to live in. But I think to your point here, as we jump into today's show, there is a way to have that balance where you can live, you can give, and you can deaccumulate in a healthy way where everybody wins.
Oh, for sure, Jared. I know Bill says in his book, he says, I think it's one of the last chapters, something like it's the impossible mission, right? It's
right.
You can't do this right. I mean, it's not going to be perfect.
Not perfect, right?
But you can think through it, and you can change the way you think about money. You can change the way that you look at your goals of as far as continue accumulation, or at what point do I start to just use what I've saved? And I think, again, it starts with it's a tool.
Yeah. Again, I can't recommend Bill Perkins' book, Die with Zero, anymore. It's a really, really great book. It's not on retirement, certainly. It's really on life and how you view life and money and wealth. And I think it corresponds and correlates with what we're talking about here really, really well. So let's turn the corner here. Let's talk about, again, the antidote. What do we do about it? How do people change these mindsets? Where do you want to start with this one?
Well, I think, again, you start with the idea that money is a tool, and you look at when you can use it most. And I've said that several times, but I can't say it enough. There's a reason the Bible talks about money and possessions more than 2,300 times, more than any other subject. And that's because it's so easy, especially in our society today, Jared, to start looking at it as more than that. It becomes less about being a means and a tool and more about the goal. All the time. And you're being bombarded by culture. You're being bombarded by advertisement. Everything from even how we've looked at it as we've tried to scrimp and save and put everything away. Again, and I'm in the world of wealth management, and I have to tell you, there are some people that need to continue to save. But I think when we're talking on this subject specifically, I see more people that will die with a bunch of wealth that don't understand just how much of a mistake that is. They don't understand that they will learn to regret dying with a ton of wealth. They will see later in life just how little that wealth means to them and that income, and they will say, I would have done it differently. If you could see what I see, Jared, and I think that's one of the benefits of what I do. I meet with, now thousands of people and have hundreds of meetings a year where I'm sitting down with wealthy individuals and hearing what they say. And again, one of the things that continually comes up is like, I wish I had looked at my money differently. More of like, I need to use it. Not that it's an idol per se, but it definitely became more than the means and more of the goal. Let me
ask you a question. I'm curious about this. Why do people do that? And again, some possible things that come to my mind. Again, you are sold an idea that you retire and now all of a sudden you are inherently supposed to not only hang on to this, but grow it. It probably fear of running out. Or maybe another reason. And what do you think is kind of that reason why people fall into that trap?
Oh, there's so many reasons, Jared. I think the biggest one, I think it's at our human nature to be selfish to some extent. Like, I got to hold on to everything for myself over time. I think it's in our, in our, not maybe our DNA certainly, but also in how we're raised, right? So this generation of people have been raised by baby boomers in that generation, which did come out of a place of extreme poverty and scarcity mindset. So that's there as well. I think there's so many reasons, but again, what I want to help people see is like there is ways to overcome that, and we've got some shows in the past about the money disorder. And anytime we talk about this, I have to key that up, because I think when people look at their money for what it is, it starts to free them. When they open their hands, it's a tool. It's to be used. It really starts to change the mindset.
I think that there is something to be said, whether you're retired or not, to look at it in such a way where I think there's a generation, or maybe I shouldn't say that. There are people out there that they hate spending and love saving. Spending always hurts. I think that that's a mindset that I've struggled with at times, because in my mind, if it's gone, if it leaves my possession, it can't come back. And that's such a scarcity way to look at things. I mean, the truth is I don't know what our GDP is worth in this country right now, but there's plenty of wealth out there. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to like hang on to it so tightly to say that God can't bless you in some fashion or way to take care of you. There's plenty of it out there. So I think that in my opinion comes into play, not just retirees, because I don't have quite the resume as you do working with this group, but I see that in just humanity in general. But something we talked about on the show too is that when you leave your job probably gave you purpose and identity. Now your purpose and identity has to get kind of consumed by something, so to speak. You have to find something to kind of dig your teeth into. And so many people then go to the finances and their bank accounts, and they have more time, and they start watching more TV, and they start watching the news, and all of a sudden, like, all of these things that they weren't really watching a ton, they're now watching a ton. And as the Bible says, like, money makes a really poor master.
Yeah, and as you have less of it coming in, right?
Yeah,
the
scary.
reliance of it does get scary,
Yeah.
and I understand that. But again, if you're looking at your wealth and you're looking at what you have as number one, not yours.
Sure.
I think that's key. We're stewards,
Yeah.
And you're able to hold your hands open and say, okay,
Sure.
This is I'm doing my best here, and you're able to realize that you don't have to grasp it so tightly. You can get off the news once in a while.
Yeah.
I think that's generally sound advice.
Good
anyway,
idea.
to not be letting the news media dictate your plans. But certainly, I think that's where it starts. I think another thing, Jared, that I think, and another antidote to this is understanding that you have to have a plan in order for this to work, right? We know that there's not there's not a finite, here's how long I'm going to live. But if we can know in general how long, we can look at life expectancy to some extent and say, okay, I need to be roughly planned for this age, right? And that's something Bill Perkins does talk about, and he wants you to come up with how much it takes for you to live, right? So how much do I need today? I like that. One thing that I would add to what Bill Perkins talks about is how important a budget is for a retiree. Doesn't talk about that. I talk about it all the time. And when we talk with our clients, I always say, hey, in the past 30 years, 40 years, whatever, your financial person's been telling you budget. And I like that. Dave Ramsey talks about, I love Dave. He says, give your money like it's a tool to be used. So take control of it.
Yeah.
Like, tell it what to do. Don't let it direct you. So you budget. When you're younger and you're trying to save, the saving is the goal of the budget. It's like, let's figure out all what's coming in. Here's what our expense starts going out. Usually there's a gap there. There's a little extra.
Yep.
What's it going to do? Hopefully, we always say, oh, yeah, save it. Now, what I think the industry does a very poor job of is says, well, now that you've made it, you've retired, forget the budget. You're budgeting.
You're free.
Yeah, you're free. And people are like, well, I don't want to budget anymore. The most important thing for many of the wealthiest people I work with, Jared, is a budget. But the difference is that once you've retired and you've accumulated wealth, the budget is there now so that you actually spend and you give. Yeah. So you have still a plan, but it holds you accountable, just like it did when you were saving money to put money into the bank so that you could someday retire or do without your job if that's what you choose to do. Yeah. Now it's, I'm going to give direction to what's left over. I'm going to budget to my charity to give this. I'm going to budget a trip every year. I'm going to budget in gifts to my kids. I'm going to budget in all of those things that we know are so important. If you don't end up budgeting and planning for it, it usually doesn't happen.
I could see how that, this is really, it's kind of a mindset game, really more than anything. Yes, it's a numbers game and a financial game, but I think you're speaking to those people that have more than enough, and all of a sudden now they have no boundaries, and that you feel a little bit loosey-goosey, and now all of a sudden you inherently know that you're not working anymore and maybe don't have the income that you used to, and now you're spending your nest egg. And so I could see how that would really put people in a trap, and how this actually sets them free.
It does. I think if there's a plan behind, and you're able to sit down and say, okay, here's here's this shark fin. Yes, it is coming down,
right.
but that is the intent.
Right.
You saved this money so that you could use it, right? And one of the things I get, just a quick segue, Jared, what I always get when we start talking about this, I know Bill Perkins talks about it too, is on the die with zero mentality. It's like, well, what about the kids, right? I mentioned giving to the kids earlier as part of your plan. It should be. More often than not, that's the
sticking point.
Yeah, it's a sticking point with people. They're like, well, my goal is to someday when money's not useful to me.
When I die.
Yeah, when I die, to then give it to the kids. That's not a gift.
Right.
Dead people can't give money away. So what I would tell you is the most generous way to be, and the most useful time for your kids to get that money, and the best way to prepare it is to prepare them to use it, is to give it to them while they need it and while they're living.
Yeah.
So I'll often come back with, well, if somebody says that to me, well, if that's the case and you're worried about them, let's not, and this is what Bill Perkins says as well. It says, well, I'm not talking about you spending their money.
Right.
There's a certain amount of wealth that most wealthy families say, I want our kids to have this amount. Not everything, but this is the amount. Okay, if you can come to that number, right, then start doing it while you're living. There's estate tax reasons for that. There's income tax reasons for that. There's so many stewardship reasons for that, more importantly. So yes, that should be done earlier in life when they can use it, and when it's most beneficial for you as the person who can actually give while you're living.
And it makes you feel like you're not spending the kids' money, and now you have this guilt thing hanging over your head because you went out and bought a new computer, and now little Johnny's not going to get his full inheritance. It takes that away.
Yeah, and it allows you to, I think, prepare them so much better. So many reasons why people need to begin that earlier. And the same thing can be said for charity. Like if charity is a big part of your reason that you have this wealth, good. Yeah. But it's much more beneficial to you and the beneficiary, the charity, to get it earlier. You can see them, what they're doing with it. You can enjoy it, right? And it is actually a real gift. We can't give away, whether it be to kids or to charity, money that is no longer useful to us.
Yeah, and again, you're reiterating the point that there's a different value in money for different people at different times, and this might actually be a much better time for your heirs, kids and grandkids, to receive that. It might have more impact, albeit smaller. I think that's probably another thing, maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I hang on to it and wait till I die 10, 20 years down the road, it might be bigger. But the truth is that the number might be bigger, but it will be of less use at the time, if I give it away at that time.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to get into the nuances of planning, but it's also not a bad idea to have the bigger growth and some of that stuff to come out of a wealthy person's estate, right? So there's reasons for that as well.
Yeah,
so
interesting.
Again, I'm such a fan of the idea of wealth transfer versus just an estate plan where you die and give it to your kids or charity. You have to do a wealth transfer plan, which starts much earlier in life.
Yeah. We got a couple minutes left here. How do you want to land this plane?
I think what I would tell somebody that's coming in and struggling with this, no matter what the age is, Jared, you got to start by understanding why you're here. You've got to understand, and everybody's going to be different there. So what is your specific values? So you as a family, you as an individual, what's most important to you? Okay. Then you start to say, am I doing those things? Does my life and my checkbook align? Whether or not you're early in your working career and you've got, the time is so important, right? And you're trying to maximize time with kids, et cetera. If that's the most important thing, prioritize it. Put less time and effort into the building of the nest egg. I'm guilty of that, Jared. And I think many times these shows are things I've personally learned from mistakes in the past. Like I would give anything. And you ask any achiever, what would you do to go back in time and to be more present? Sometimes that doesn't just mean being there. It means truly being present when your kids are younger, right? So look at what's most important to you, at what stage you're in. Then look at your financial situation and come up and look, do they align, right? Does the way you look at life, your value system, align with what you're doing with your checkbook? When you can come together on that, I think you're well on your way to, answering this question. And I think most people will find that if they're honest with what they're doing, they do need to adjust.
Yeah.
Personally, I need to. I mean, there's things in my life that I'm doing that I'm like, yeah, that doesn't align with what I'm saying. So I think it's really important people start there. Build some contentment in your life. Get off that treadmill of, there's always more, and really start there. I love the verse in 1 Timothy 6:6, godliness with contentment is great gain. It's great wealth, in fact, it says in some versions. Such an important reminder that if we have contentment and we understand what's most important to us, right, our money should follow.
Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through an Avantax affiliated insurance agency.